Welcome to Module 2. Today we are continuing about the lifeline. I hope you enjoyed the first lesson about the lifeline, including the timing of the line. So what we have today is about the lifeline connecting to the fate line, the chained line, a broken line, short line or forked line, including even a little about the sister lifeline. But that will continue in another section as well, because it has other names such as the Mars line. So what do we have first? The lifeline to the fate line. Okay, so here we are looking at the lifeline that is, I'll just turn it on to red, quite dark through here, if you can see that, and then it starts to fade a little bit, but it joins to the fate line. The fate line is the line here in the middle of the palm. So when the lifeline connects to that line, it suggests change towards more ambitious work-related things. It can mean other life changes, including getting married, getting divorced, having children. Mainly it is more about becoming more career orientated. So you need to look for other clues on the palm to see what it might be related to. For instance, if it's career related, the fate line itself here might begin to look deeper at the same age. So if you remember, we did the timing on the previous video. If the timing approximately halfway on the line is 40, that means after we could tick off probably about 4 to 5 millimeters across there. That would indicate approximately when the lifeline hits the fate line is about age 45. So then on the fate line we would look for age 45, and we will talk about the fate line timing later, but I'll quickly show you now that around about where it meets the headline is age 35, and around about when it meets the heart line is age 50. So age 45 is somewhere around the middle. So in this case we would look at the fate line to see what it's doing as far as the age of 45 when the lifeline clashes with the fate line. So what is the fate line doing there? So here it looks like there's been a change around the 35, and it looks like a steady course right through to 50, apart from one little interference line. So looking at the career, it looks steady and looks somewhat unchanged. So it may be related to more personal, such as a marriage. So then we would also look at the marriage line, which is over here underneath the pinky, and we would work out the timing on that. Of course, we will talk about all of those other things in future videos, but here we are just discussing the lifeline to the fate line and what it means. So basically it represents some kind of a major change in life, more than likely career related, and in this case it may not be. But obviously if you're reading someone's palm, you would be asking them these questions. Are you married? Are you going to change your career? Etc., etc., depending on their age at the time. Okay, so let's click to the next video. I hope this is working. There it is. Okay, so the next one we are talking about the chained lifeline. So I don't know if you can see here. It is quite frazzled looking. It seems to have like little tiny triangles all along its length. So it doesn't look like a nice smooth line. So these can represent a multitude of things. They can be anything to do with poor health. So you would look at the health lines, which are over here, and you would also look at the nails and the skin, and you would look for warts, dry areas of the skin, other health issues, which we will talk about later. But in general, it depicts a more stressful period. So this person might have, in general, a stressful nature. They are nervous and they might be a little bit hyperactive. They may have scattered life goals. Check the fate line for that. Again, you check to see what this fate line is doing, and is there a fate line at all. It might be someone who's a chronic worrier. So they constantly have little problems that they make up in their mind, whether or not those problems are real. So if the lines looks like in an area starts to smooth out, in which in this case it does, you can see here there's quite a smooth line. It's no longer all frazzled. So that shows that the person has got over whatever that phase in their life was, and things have improved for the rest of their life. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, now we are talking about if the lifeline is broken. So here we have this, the hand on the left, that I've kind of tried to draw it on the other hand. The lifeline dips down, but then stops. And then there's another section of the lifeline that starts in a new area. So that's called an overlapping lifeline, because the lines overlap. That means that the person has made a plan to make a change. All breaks mean that there's a change in the life. So if you imagine it like a road following a certain path, and then for a period thinking about changing that path, and that's the overlapping phase, that means that you finally do make that change in your life. So a clean break, however, is different. So this kind of break where the line comes down and then continues. So if this area here is a clean break where it's got a big gap, that shows uncertainty. So whether it's for health reasons, for another part of life, it means that a change is necessary, and it is a cautionary to take more care during that time. Even though the life does continue afterwards, it leaves this gap, which is a danger zone. So that's a warning. And if it's on this part of the lifeline, this warning would be around about the age of between 35 and 40. And that 5-year gap would be a period to be more careful with everything. So one thing also you need to look for is to see if there are sister lines, and I'll explain. So if you have this break, but if there are sister lines, in other words, a line here or a line on the other side, they are protecting. that area. So that gives support, which is good. So it's showing change, but everything is going well. Sometimes there will also be lines across, forming like a square. Squares are a sign of protection on the line, and we can also talk about those marks in the next lesson, next video. Okay, so I rubbed them out. If those support lines that I had there before, if these support lines are on the inside, that refers to the support coming from family. If the support line is on that outside of the lifeline over here, that means the support comes from an outside source, such as a boss or a non-personal type of person, more likely a boss or a non-relative. On the inside, and when I say family, it can also be a partner, husband or wife. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, the most talked about in palmistry is the short and weak lifeline. So this photo, you can see it has only one line across that stands out very strong. It's called the SIMIAN line. We will definitely be talking about that in detail. I do have a whole book on the SIMIAN line. If you're interested, you can check that out on my website. But we will cover the SIMIAN line in these lessons. But right now we are talking about this short and weak lifeline. This person has a slight lifeline there, and it seems to just end right there. And it's very short. There's faint lines down the bottom. These are more so representing parts of the lifeline and parts of the fate line. That you can't see it properly maybe, but there is a faint fate line right there. So these are typical on the young people. This hand at the time, the person was only 17. So it can represent somebody who doesn't have long-term goals yet. They might be relatively spoilt at home with little responsibility, so that their parents would do everything for them, so they don't have to have these goals and plans and routine. So it's quite unsettled. There's no set, established stability kind of thing. So having a stable home and lifestyle will help weaken that. So what that represents. So imagine if the lifeline were like a tree, and these are its roots. Coming down are the tree roots. So if the tree doesn't have the roots to reach the ground, the person is not grounded. The energy may be just scattered because the energy is not running straight. The energy is not running smoothly along this lifeline and with a steady path. It's just showing that the energy can go wherever. The person might go from job to job. They might have multiple partners, keep changing their partners in life, and just not have any set path directed. So they definitely love their freedom. That is a love of freedom type person, and they do dislike rules and things like that. So they might prefer to just follow their own guidance, which can sometimes be to their own detriment, especially if they do have this SIMIAN line. So the short, weak lifeline does not mean a short life by any means. It is literally just representing the personality is more scattered, less grounded, also could be a little bit hyperactive, especially like looking at the amount of Venus. Look at how much energy there is there. Look how much energy there is here. If you remember back to the areas of the hand, how we talked about the well-developed areas. So this is showing that person has a lot of energy, and yet with the short lifeline, it's not grounded, so they may be, that's one of the signs of some potentially like attention deficit disorder or short attention span, basically. So they do like to travel. People with the short lifeline are likely to travel more so than people who have the full lifeline. So they have that freedom, wanting to be free. Moving on to the next slide. So we had the short and weak lifeline. Now we have the short and thick lifeline. And you can see on this one, it starts out quite thick and then gradually becomes thinner. So the line gradually becoming thinner in this case is representing a more clearer path in life, even though it is short. The start of the lifeline looks quite messy, and that's representing that period, maybe a stressful childhood, but it is gradually smoothing out. So it probably by the time they're in their 20s, things are looking much better for them, so showing less struggle. But again, the short lifeline is showing that they are ungrounded. There are some splitting going on there. What the splitting and the short lifeline can also represent is a split in the family roots. So there may be parents who have split up and they've lived in a broken family, because the lifeline can represent the family. So in saying that, it also means the person might not follow family tradition. If the family is not split, that person individually doesn't like to follow the family's tradition. They like to follow their own guidance. This person does have a line, a fine line that connects to the fate line up the middle here, and that's showing that what we talked about earlier is connecting more to the career around that age. And in this case, this line starts in their 40s, and when you look at their career line in their 40s, there is obstacles. There's an obstacle line. We'll talk about obstacle lines in the next lesson. There's that approximately in the same age as when this branch hits the fate line. But here we are just regarding the thick lifeline. The thicker the line, the more energy there is focused on that one track. So the more a person thinks about the same lines, the more thicker the line becomes. So that person has been thinking along the same lines for quite a while, and then suddenly they're no longer thinking along the same lines. They're thinking along different lines, and that's exactly the point where his life connects to the fate line and things make a turn in his life. And in this case, it's likely to be family related because of the lack of continuing fate line up the top. Okay, the fork at the end of the lifeline. This is a very faint image, but a fork right at the very end of the fate line, which this person has, looks like this. And there is a line that connects like that as well. So this is a little bit more common, and there is so many various meanings to it because travel lines appear like a branch. This one that's coming out from the lifeline is like a travel line, but the main part of the lifeline continues to wrap around the thumb. So at this point where the fork appears is where there is a decision in life. A fork is like a fork in the road, and you decide which way you're going to go. It is quite a lucky sign to have. It can represent moving abroad. It can represent owning two homes or having two separate lifestyles. It could be, for instance, because it's later in life, so this could be representing being a grandparent, the inner life with family, and the outer life, having your own separate outer life apart from being just a grandparent. It's not all about family, it's all about yourself and your freedom as well. Okay, I think there's one more video in this lesson. Yes, we're talking a little bit about the inner lifeline, because some people do have two lifelines, and it looks like a second lifeline that has many names. It can be called the Mars line, can be a double lifeline, inner lifeline, sister line, and these can vary in their length. The Mars line gets its name because it arises from this area, which is the inner Mars area. And some palm readers call it the warrior line because of the power and the masculinity that comes with the area of Mars. That represents, when it runs along the lifeline, represents more personal drive and assertiveness, and to somewhat aggression, and it can depict quick temper, especially if other aspects agrees. For instance, if this Mars area is also puffy looking, that represents more of the Mars characteristics of having a quick temper. The Russian president has a strong Mars line, and his tends to run not so close to the lifeline. His runs towards the Mount of Venus, and that's not so much as an inner lifeline for him because it's not closer to the lifeline. So for him, that represents more of the Mars energy. And we'll probably talk more about that in another video. I just wanted to quickly touch on that Mars line as a double lifeline, which gives support to the lifeline. It can represent somebody who has an ability to get over illness quickly, somebody who potentially has a spirit guide to give them more strength in life, and they don't tend to get sick quite as easily as those without this line. And that looks like the end of this lesson, and we shall talk more about the lifeline in lesson 5.